Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to the Pavlov podcast, episode number 3. I'm your friend KoolAidMan, and boy, oh boy, am I excited about today's podcast. We are going to be joined by the legendary Junt of Vankrupt. He's going to be talking about all things Pavlov, all things virtual reality, all things Engine 4.27 upgrade. It's going to be a lot of fun, so buckle in, stay tuned, and let's welcome Junt to the program.
No problem. So I'm Junt. It's obviously a pseudonym. A little bit of a private person, so I don't really put my real name out there. I am sort of a man of many hats at Vankrupt Studios. A lot of our staff is on the creative or engineering field. And so just to keep the operations going and the day-to-day business, so to speak, that's where I sort of come in, and also sort of a liaison between the community and the actual developers at Vankrupt. So that's basically my role. I know I'm called the community manager on Discord, but there's a lot more to it that I do sort of on the background, other than just interacting with the community. As far as me, myself, I like long walks on the beach, candlelit dinners, and a nice glass of wine.
Well, there we go. So can you tell us, for the folks who aren't familiar, of course, Vankrupt is the company that's in charge of Pavlov, that's developed Pavlov. Can you talk just a little bit about what Vankrupt is and what that kind of looks like as an organization?
Sure. So Vankrupt, well, let's just start with the name Vankrupt. Where'd that come from? Well, Dave Vills, of course, started Pavlov VR after a previous project, Exclavopolis. I don't know if I can pronounce it correctly, but it's essentially a zombie game that you're fighting with an excavator to defeat zombies. And that was like a nice little project for him. And once he did that, the VR headsets came out in 2016. That was the Oculus Rift CV1 and the HTC Vive were the first sort of main headsets to come out. And there wasn't a lot of content, especially with first-person shooters. And there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of small projects. There wasn't much, if any, AAA content. So because of the lack of content and his experience with his previous game, he thought, this is something I could probably tackle, and did so. So after some alphas and kind of just sharing what he's been making, Discord server was created, the Pavlov Discord, and that was created by Zig. He was an early friend and fan of Dave's work. And more people joined in. I wasn't involved at this point, of course. I came in much later. But after all the iterative feedback and listening to what people kind of wanted out of the game and what they could see the potential future for, he decided to add a workshop option, which meant that anyone could create a map and put it in the game. And it's not the first time a game's done that, but it's one of the first VR games to do that. And that's what really set Pavlov apart, was the fact that the community could actually participate in the actual content of the game. And after that, it just exploded. People started making maps. Those maps would get shared on YouTube. People would watch the YouTube video and buy Pavlov. And that's really how everything steamrolled and snowballed. I guess snowballed is the right word to say. Everything snowballed into popularity. And as a result, Dave was fortunate enough to have the means to start a company. And I guess I'll circle back to the name Vankrupt. Dave wants to make a very upper high class studio. If you want to call it AA, that's the goal. to make a AA studio or go bankrupt trying. So we have no investors. He is the sole proprietor. So he has full ownership. There's no investors to answer to but Dave. And since he's the creative director, you know, there's not really much that can stand in our way as far as direction. And that's what sort of it comes by, go bankrupt trying, or, be successful. It's one of the two. There's no in between. So that's sort of what the name comes from. It's play on words. And how I sort of ended up at Vankrupt was I just got involved with, in the Discord and in the community. I was very active. I eventually got asked to become a moderator. I think it's because I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I was a little bit level-headed and mature about a lot of things. Of course, not 100% completely mature. I'd goof off and things like that. Something that I wouldn't really do now, just as a professional face for the company. But I got brought on as a moderator, and Dave needed some help with managing the community, and offered me a position from that. And I of course took some time to think about it and eventually accepted. And once I got brought on board, I sort of had the role of community manager. So I would help manage the community. I would write the update posts on Steam, manage the Patreon page, and after some time doing that, just more responsibility was put into my lap by Dave. Dave asked me to do some more and more things within. And so that's sort of where I'm at now. Is I don't really have an official title. I do the recruiting and talent acquisition. Well, what else? Okay, so I do talent acquisition. I'm sort of the QA manager, so I manage the team of QA testers, and that sort of de facto makes me the Scrum Lord as far as the bug tracking and bug triage process. And I also negotiate with platform holders and partnerships. So I talk to the various different companies that are interested in our product, or products that we're interested in theirs. And so I also, oh man, a lot of other back-end work. So just basically odds and ends. Also the company cheerleader to make everybody feel proud of the work, because they are very, very talented. And that's sort of my day-to-day and what I do within the company. A lot of it's kind of unseen, but that's sort of the whole point, I guess, in that sense. And if anybody has anything that they want to reach out to me about, I'm always open to talking. Just make sure it's reasonable, and just don't DM me hi, or I have a question. Just say your question. I will be happy to answer it if it's reasonable. And yeah.
Well, I know you certainly have a lot on your plate, and as we see, folks are in and out all day long. I guess that's kind of part of an international team that you guys have assembled at Vankrupt. So, kind of thinking about a traditional office job, I'm sure you get this all the time. Like, wow, Junt, do you really get paid to play video games? What do you how do you message this to friends or family when they ask, Junt, what do you do all day long?
So what I do all day long, that's sort of my day to day. I mean, I wake up, I scour the social media, the forums, and try to keep a pulse on the community and what they're thinking and what they're doing, because we want to stay on top of that. We don't want concerns to run away. And so I'll definitely forward that information over to the team to consider, and maybe like talk over and see if it's something that we can do to address. Of course, we would like to be very fast about it, but got to keep in mind, up until recently, we only had 2 engine engineers, and now we have a third. they're assisting with the engine upgrade at this moment, and we're still hiring. So if you are a low-level programmer, if you understand C++, experience in Unreal Engine, we'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to send your resume or CV to jobs@vankrupt.com, and we'd be happy to set up a meeting. So so like I said, recruiting. So I'm also doing talent acquisition and trying to find. Now we're focusing on people in the Kelowna area of Canada, BC, for a few unannounced things that we're excited to do. Some of that requires a physical presence. So unfortunately will be tied to the location. And that's for specific roles. We still want to hire remotely, but we also at the same time want to incentivize coming to Kelowna and joining the office, so to speak, the studio, to have face-to-face interactions, because what we've learned is being remote, trying to collaborate on a game remotely is very, very difficult. There's a lot of communication barriers, and we're dealing with time zones, and our current staff is not obligated or required to move to Vancouver, but we would love to incentivize them. And of course, we don't want to uproot any families or anything like that. But if you're a youngin with a lot of confidence and vigor and would be happy to sort of go on this journey, I think there's a lot of people out there that are willing to do that, especially if they're just fresh out of school and looking for some good work in a actually very beautiful city, actually. If you've ever looked at pictures of Kelowna, it's just absolutely like picture perfect landscape-esque of a small little city. And I also sort of manage the moderation team on Discord, but I give them most of the responsibility to make their own decisions. The one thing I really like to do is ask for their feedback. Here's my idea. What do you guys think of this? Or, I made this decision. Would you guys have done it differently? I feel like that's super important with checking yourself and making sure that you're sort of on the right track and you're not being too underhanded or heavy-handed with a certain action or policy. And we get a little criticized for being strict, but that's sort of necessary. We do have kids, well, not kids, but people that are not 18 and over, and I have a huge concern about that. And I just want to make sure that we have a nice community, that we like to have fun, but at the same time, we don't want it to turn a little too explicit, and there's a lot of concern there from just a morality standpoint, if not a legal standpoint. We can't have people sharing not safe for work images in front of 15 or 16-year-olds, because that's sort of the law. But that's not the bare minimum of why I feel that way about the Pavlov community. And these are rules that were established long before I came aboard. So I'm just helping trying to maintain that with the massive growth that we've had since the launch of the Oculus Quest, which has just exploded in popularity. So because it's more accessible, that means a lot of young people have access to VR now that previously didn't. And it's actually quite a controversial issue with a lot of people that play Quest, not just Pavlov, but other games in general. They don't like the fact that they're having to play with kids, but if you wanted low cost barrier to VR, you're going to get everything that comes along with that, and that includes young kids that like to play games. I
Yeah,
grew up playing
absolutely.
games. I think everybody did. So we didn't have the benefit of the internet to kind of have voice chat over. We had our dial up, and mom would pick up the phone and you'd get disconnected. And so there was no voice chat. So you didn't really understand that you were playing with somebody that was really young or really old. Um, and so, times have changed, of course, but uh, we all grew up playing games, and we just kind of need to get used to the fact that there's going to be kids, and we are in a mature rated game. It's up to the parents to police their children and what they are or not allowed to play. And I think, yeah.
Well,
So
you've
I want
certainly done
to.
a great job. I mean, just
Oh, thank
exponential
you.
growth as we've seen the numbers that Dave has tweeted out and shared publicly since Christmas. I mean, I
Mhm.
think yesterday he announced there was, 16,000 concurrent players on Pavlov Shack. I mean, 16,000 people playing at one particular moment in time. Those
It's
numbers are
extremely
staggering.
humbling.
And to try to
Yeah.
police a community of that size, that you're basically trying to police a small city at that point.
Yeah, I really like to think of it in terms of, if you had all these people playing right now and packed them into a stadium, how big would this stadium be?
Yeah,
It's
well,
I
yeah,
I have weird thought experiments like that.
that's pretty wild. And maybe one of these days, if all goes well, we'll have a PavCon and we can all play together.
That would be great. That would be great.
So thinking about the dev team and kind of the remote stuff, how many folks on the dev team have actually met in person?
Uh, Not many, to be quite honest. I know I've actually met with one of our QA testers because they were just sort of traveling around and knew I was in the area. So we met up for lunch, and it was kind of nice. Um, we did have our sound designer meet up with one of our developers who happened to have a decent collection of guns to do some live recording. He brought in tons and tons of audio equipment that he purchased specifically for uh, Vankrupt to do more with his audio work. And that's what I love about the talent on our team is they're going as hard as they can to achieve the best possible results and high quality results. And things like purchasing, 4 different microphones that can handle different sort of percussive wavelengths, and ones that specialize in the distance and in capturing like very far away sounds, or very up close sounds that are like right next to the gun to hear all the metal move around, clink and slide. uh, so that was a really cool thing that happened recently. That's not implemented in Pavlov proper, but it's definitely going to be useful for the future. And I can't exactly specify exactly what that might be. But, of course, we're not going to be making Pavlov forever. So we do have some future projects that are sort of in the works. And part of that element of those sound recordings is going to play a part of that for
Wow.
sure. And yeah, so we don't generally meet up. Vankrupt sort of exploded in employees during COVID, so travel has been kind of restricted in that sense. And I know things are calming down now, and maybe we can open that door for opportunity to have some more traveling and employees meeting each other, and maybe a company retreat. Who knows? But we haven't really had a chance to discuss it due to the pandemic. So it's everybody's been sort of keeping to themselves.
Well, very understandable and certainly not unique to Vankrupt. I mean, everybody around the world has been kind of that way. So it's exciting as things are beginning to open up. And it's really exciting to hear that you're going to be putting on some local staff and talent up in the Canada area. So hopefully we'll get to benefit from all those great things. I want to shift, if we could, to the topic that certainly everybody's talking about, the upcoming engine upgrade. And I guess just at a very basic level, I mean, talk to me like I'm a second grader. What is an engine upgrade? Why are we going through the process? What does it mean? What do we hope to achieve by doing this?
Okay, sure. So, to build a game, you need to sort of lay out the foundations of that game. And most companies opt to use an engine. One of the most popular ones is Unity. I think it got started sort of in the mobile game business and then has since expanded to AAA titles that you'll see on a console. And then there's Unreal Engine, and that's a very, very old engine that has been around since, gosh, I think the 90s, since Unreal Tournament 99-ish or something like that. So they've been one of the first to massively license out the engine. Most games sort of create their own engine, like way back. They would create their own engine and sort of keep it to themselves as an internal tool. And not many companies would license it out to other companies. I think Valve was one of the first, and then Unreal, and then Unity came along. Those are sort of the most popular ones. But games like Bethesda's, Skyrim and Fallout are all based on the same engine, and that's all built in-house, and it doesn't really see the light of day outside of that company, as far as I'm aware. But that's just one of the examples. Same with like Grand Theft Auto and their engine. And so what we do is take that foundation and apply it to the content that we want to make. And the tools that Epic and Unity provide make it much easier when you're dealing with interacting with actual VR hardware. If you're trying to build a game from scratch and incorporate VR, and not only do you have to like understand very, very low level GPU operations, but you're also dealing with the hardware itself and all the problems that brings. So it's much easier to get kickstarted, especially if you're a startup or a small company. It's almost essential because you can work on a game engine for 2 years with maybe 2 people, and you're not even going to be halfway done getting the thing to actually compile. It's an immense operation to build an engine from scratch. So we start with Unreal Engine. I might be over explaining, but I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, I think the other important part here is that because you're using Unreal Engine, it allows the community to make maps and modes and other assets too, which is it's pretty cool. I don't see that in other games.
Right. And we were not the first game to do that, but sort of the first VR game. And I think others have followed suit. Some of our competitors, if you want to call them that, have opened the door for people to make maps for their games. And I think that's based off seeing the success of Pavlov and wanting to sort of adopt that. So, well, let's talk about the engine upgrade now. So you basically have the software development kit, the SDK, that the engine developer publishes, and they are on certain versions. I think Pavlov originally started on 4.15. Eventually, we upgraded to 4.21 sometime in 2018, I want to say. It's somewhere around 2018. And this is a very old engine. It came with problems and bugs. And the thing about dealing with bugs is if you want to fix some of the engine level bugs, they suggest upgrading or updating the engine itself to their new version. That's very easy when you're a single player game. It's also somewhat more straightforward when you're a multiplayer game that does not have community content. Immensely difficult if you're a multiplayer game with content that is created by the community, because there's a lot of compatibility concerns because it's not backwards compatible or forwards compatible in that sort of sense. So it is going to be unfortunate, but we might lose some of, if not a lot of that content that hasn't been touched or updated by any of the workshop creators in the past. But if it's anything like the previous update, even people that worked on Pavlov and went dormant, a simple comment on their Steam page to say, hey, can you just update your maps or your content real quick? Like, that would be really cool because I really liked your map, and they've upgraded the engine. Can you please, just drop in the mod kit and update it and, publish it once more? It's pretty straightforward if you're just building a map. If it's a custom map with a lot of blueprint functions, and blueprint functions is sort of a scripted language that makes programming a lot easier for people that are not programmers. So people that want to create custom game modes use blueprints. That might get a little bit more dicey depending on how complicated your blueprints are, because Unreal, for their updates, will sometimes deprecate things or remove functions or replace them entirely. So that might take some consideration if you're working on a very complicated game mode, but a very general, easy sort of blueprint game mode, like something like, oh, I want to make a capture the flag sort of game mode, that should be very easy to adopt. But the general content in Pavlov is mostly just vanilla game mode based maps using our own built-in mod kit. So why are we doing the engine upgrade? Well, there's a lot of long-standing bugs that we cannot fix due to the engine that we currently have, such as, for example, left eye rendering. So that's a setting in our UI, and I'm sure many people have noticed that it does not function at all. That is an actual problem of 4.21, and it's a bug within the Unreal Engine for that version of the engine. And that's something we cannot fix until we address the engine itself in the versioning. So there's a lot of bugs like that. There's some bugs that are sort of deeply inherent in the base of the Pavlov core that we might not be able to address. I know a big thing is people want the ability to grip the gun with two hands and let go of the trigger hand and pull out a pistol while still holding onto the rifle with their forehand. That's just something very core to how Pavlov was originally built, and we would have to refactor so much code to address that. And I don't know if that's going to be in the scope of the game. That might be something we could consider. It just really depends on how much time we have, and time is something we don't have, because we want to get Pavlov in a finished state. And I say finished as in sort of a 1.0, where we feel comfortable with saying, this is a feature complete game. We're not going to be done updating it, but we consider it, out of early access, which is a lot of, we get a lot of criticisms for being in early access for like 5 years or something crazy like that. And it's just a matter of the scope of the game has changed due to the success of the game. So we want to aim higher. And you can call that scope creep, and you'd be totally right to say that, but we want to make a really good game in the end before we move on to other projects. And the last thing we want to do is abandon our community. A lot of silence happens between our updates, but that's just because of how grueling the development process can be. A simple bug fix can take weeks, and it could be a minor bug fix, but it could take refactoring of code. It could take many different iterations before it actually works as intended. And you can fix one thing and end up breaking another. And that's why it's really difficult to address some of these issues. But nevertheless, we have a really talented team, and oh my gosh, the amount of bugs we solved last year. And it kind of flies under the radar because people don't really think about the bugs you fix. They think about the bugs you don't fix and the ones that really irritate them. To be for example, one of our bugs is the spawning system, and spawning, in deathmatch or team deathmatch. Sometimes you'll spawn right in front of an enemy or right behind them, and that can be frustrating. And I understand that's frustrating, and that's something that the team actually has tried to address several times, and ended up making the system even worse than it was before. And that's sort of why that sort of got parked or put on the back burner, so to speak, just because of the level of difficulty of dealing with that issue. And it may seem on the surface that it's just a simple fix, but there's a lot that goes into it. So that's just like one example of why we're doing the engine upgrade. And another is feature sets in mobile. When 4.21 came out, there was no Oculus Quest. Like, nobody knew that the system was going to exist. I mean, on a very high level, you kind of understood, VR is going into standalone eventually, but that engine it wasn't built for that. It didn't have the functions. So we're not really building for Oculus Quest. We're building for Android. So the engine is essentially thinking we're a mobile game and not a mobile VR headset based off the XR2 chip. And so there's a lot of overhead that we're dealing with on our current engine. And that's why we don't have scopes or, Gore effects, which is being reworked from the ground up. So I know that's a very common question. When are we getting scopes? Other games have scopes. Why don't you have scopes? Well, other games are on different engines such as Unity, and they also had the benefit of upgrading their engine as well and being on a version that better supports the overhead with, using rendering a camera on top of the actual on top of the scope, which is essentially what you're doing. And it can be very expensive on the processes to do that without the optimizations that the engine upgrades provide. So with this engine upgrade, we should be able to, we will be able to bring scopes into the mobile Pavlov Shack version. And we're going to get a lot of more overhead decrease, and that will allow for people to be able to make, more content suited for their needs. So hopefully bigger sized maps, hopefully more detail, and hopefully maybe a little bit more effects. Don't quote me on that. It's still very early to tell. But that's sort of why we're doing the engine upgrade. We want to make a better game. And we're very, very handcuffed by 4.21. It's actually not a very great engine version. It's a little bit notorious within the developer community as being very problematic. And so in order to move forward, this is something that we must do, especially with our partnership with Sony. That's going to be a requirement, like just as a baseline. So if we have to do that, we might as well bring all the platforms along with us. And I know a very big worry is that we're going to lose a lot of workshop content, but it's either get stuck and unable to move forward, or do we sort of break things and make it a better system in the end. So
well, it makes a lot of sense.
It's a very hard decision.
Well, absolutely. And you think about how much technology advances in just a year's time. And now, reflecting back, 4.21 has been out for years now, not just 1 year, but several years.
Mm-hmm.
And when it first came out, as you mentioned, stuff like the Oculus, the Quest 1, the Quest 2, the upcoming new Quest that'll be out, maybe next year, that stuff wasn't even thought about. So it's really kind of clear to see how you're kind of handcuffed and really set to the limitations of working with a system that was designed when none of these things even existed. So it's pretty amazing, at least in my opinion, that you're able to get the game to where it's at today using this, in the technology space, what we'd consider to be antique architecture and antique software and programming.
Right. And from a player perspective, it's a little scary because they're worried about their favorite maps disappearing. But I do know that people in the actual workshop that create for the Steam workshop creating maps, they are super excited because there's a lot of assets that they want to be able to use with Pavlov, but can't because they're not supported by 4.21. And there's so many assets that these folks want to use, whether that be effects, just general environments, and things like that, or perhaps some blueprint logic. I'm not sure, but they're very excited to get their hands on the new engine so that they can experiment and hopefully improve their custom game modes with all the new functions that it comes with.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be exciting, and I'm looking forward to the next wave of new products and features that this is going to bring. And you know, thanks to everybody at Vankrupt for keeping it on a, I mean, it's not a 100% open platform, but it's an accessible platform that you can still be a creator on and still
Yes.
play with and have a lot of fun with. So, you know, thank you for being committed to keeping that open environment where everybody can create and contribute. I think that's really a really important part of what the Pavlov community has become about.
Exactly. And it's we don't have that many rules, but we do have some, and they're fairly obvious. No racist or overtly sexual content. We don't. We're not the platform for that. Um, we also don't welcome racism. We don't want to provide a platform for that sort of thing. And we're not exactly a sex game either. So um, you can have a player model in a bikini, but as far as like full on nudity, that's something that we're probably not going to allow on. And at the same time, we do have assets that we spend a lot of time working on. We have a very large creative team and spend a lot of money to make assets from scratch instead of purchasing them from the store. Um, I know there's been sort of some controversy that we're still using, a lot of assets, but that's a lot of deprecated stuff that's no longer in the game. Like you hear about people bring the old guns back. Well, those old guns are, purchased assets that we don't want to use anymore. We like our own, built from scratch stuff. And so in that event, we just ask that you respect the official assets and not try to pull them out yourself and re-import them in any sort of way. And that's a fairly obvious rule to sort of follow. I know it was sort of a big deal at the time when we had a certain incident, but you can't really do that stuff with other games. I know Valve is very liaison-faire. Is that the right word? With
I think
allowing
so.
people to use their assets, but that's like the only company I'm aware of that does not care what you do with them with their source engine stuff.
So
To a
let's
certain degree.
talk just all these questions you see on Discord all day long. Let's just put a big pin in them, and let's just answer them definitively to help everybody out. So, new upgrade scopes you've already talked about. Scopes are planned. Scopes will be coming. What about Gore?
Gore. So we're actually reworking Gore from the ground up. So, and it's a lot cheaper on the CPU, which means we're going to be able to incorporate it into the mobile platform. And there's going to be like nice gibs. Dave really likes gibs. So that's definitely coming. We're really happy about it, and we've gotten very far along with it. And it's I don't want to say it's completely finished, but we're really like almost there. I don't want to speak on behalf of our tech artist or our engine programmer, but they've done a fantastic job. Spent a lot of time working on this new system, and we're extremely excited to introduce Gore back to mobile. I know it was implemented at some point, but it just killed the processors. So we had to remove it, of course, along with some other things that have been introduced before, but later removed. But ultimately, it's to make a better game. A game that will have to run to Oculus standards as far as performance, because we have to hit that 72 hertz target. have to. Otherwise, they would not allow us on the store. I know we're in the app labs right now, but trying to get officially on the store, the stakes are much higher to reach certain performance levels, and there's a lot of unforgiving sort of standards that they do, and well within reason. You don't want to buy a game from their store and have it turn into a slideshow on your face, and you get sick. So it makes a lot of sense for them to have the scrutiny that they do and the quality that they want to achieve with their store.
Well, absolutely, because at the end of the day, it's their product as well, and you're a reflection on them, right? So if it runs horribly and gets everybody seasick, that's not going to work well. Can you talk a little bit about OpenXR, what that is, and that's going to be included in the update too, from what I understand?
Yes, that's part of the engine upgrade, is switching to OpenXR, and this has been a really big problem for us because of the amount of refactoring that we had to do. So back when VR first started, we had, I think it was OVR, that's what Oculus calls their runtime, and then OpenVR, which is Valve's runtime, which is based off, the HTC hardware, later the Valve Index, and some other hardware like Pimax, like very specialized sort of niche VR products. So, and then of course you have Windows Mixed Reality. But for as far as I'm aware, that's not 100% native, but a little bit more further implemented in OpenVR. So, you've got all these different standards and how we're trying to support all of them at once. And it's a bit messy because they use different programming API calls and things like that. So OpenXR standardizes all of that. All these groups, all these vendors got together and said, "Hey, let's just create a standard. All our devices and hardware will they'll share the same calls, the same APIs, and the same functions, and it will be also multi-platform. So what I publish on PC will work on Oculus Quest, for example. So it standardizes a lot of this stuff. It's still very early. A lot of growing pains involved too with that. And so what that ended up doing meant that we had to rip out all of our input, everything that we had before in regards to controller bindings, gun angles, wrist angles. All that is gone, and we have to sort of rebuild it again. And so right now we're already in 4.27. It works. It's stable. We don't really encounter crashes. It's basically the same game that we had before. So there's not real any optimization or benefits quite yet at this stage. But one of the things that we're working on now is sort of the input, and the gun angles are quite goofy right now to actually use, and it's going to break a lot of people's muscle memory to try to. If we ship it like the way it is, it's not going to be great. There's going to be a lot of unhappy people, including myself, and that it's going to be very. So we have to try to get it back to the way it felt before, and I think trying to achieve 100%. It's a goal of ours, but it may be a bit unrealistic just because of they're just two different systems. It's basically just starting over, and so there's a lot of unseen, hidden things that people don't notice about Pavlov. Is when you're, put your hands right in front of you, start interacting with your hands, and how you can kind of touch your hands and all that. Now picture the volume of the controller itself being in the way, and try to interact with a virtual item. Your controller gets in the way a lot. So what a lot of people don't realize with Pavlov is there's a lot of offsetting with how things are held or interacted with. The pinpoint of the interaction volume. That stuff's cheated in a lot of ways, and a lot of games do that too by necessity. You've got different controllers that have different shapes, different sizes, different placement of tracking rings. So there's always going to be clashes there, and that's sort of the problem with trying to be exactly one-to-one with input, is trying to deal with all these different input options. It's not quite easy. It's not like supporting an Xbox and a PS5 controller, because they're not dealing with the volume of space, interacting in a actual, physical, real world space in a sense. So it's not that easy. We've got to deal with the actual size and dimensions of these controllers, and then hopefully not clashing with each other. For example, trying to put a revolver bullet into the cylinder. That's a very fine interaction. Trying to bring your fingers over to your hand, and we have to make sure that those offsets that we had created originally from the previous input system matches up as close as possible with this new system with OpenXR. And why OpenXR? It's going to make it easier to ship multi-platform, and it's 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 going to be the standard going forward. So we might as well future-proof it that way as well, because you know Oculus and Valve aren't going to really ship that many new features on Steam, or not Steam VR, I'm sorry, on OpenVR or OVR. And those run times, it's now going, all their resources are going to OpenXR now. So we want to make sure that we put it in a safe place, and it also circumvents a lot of unnecessary overhead that people were experiencing before with the old systems. So on top of the input system, standardizing everything, making everything easier to sort of support broadly, we're also going to get some performance benefits out of it. So I want to say it's a win-win. It's not exactly a win right now because it's very painful trying to replace and rip out the old stuff and put in the new stuff. It's very, very painful right now. But in the end, we think it's a good move, and we don't really have a choice, because I think if we want Pavlov to last, because eventually we want to consider the game complete, still ship updates. They might be minor, but we want to make sure the game can stand the test of time, and somebody that has fond memories of playing Pavlov 10 years ago can still go back to it and enjoy it. So that's sort of OpenXR in a nutshell.
I know everybody's really excited to get the release candidate, especially on the Shack side, and test out the new features and test out the new game mode. But as you kind of alluded to here, gosh, there's just so much work that has to be done that's really never been done before, so that you don't have a bad experience. Because that's the last thing you want to do, is ship an RC with all this anticipation, and then it doesn't work, and people get frustrated, and you can't load the guns, you can't shoot the guns, you can't play the game like you're used to. You
Right.
can only imagine the barrage of criticism and negative comments that would be streaming out. So patience, I guess, is our biggest asset right now. We urge everyone to be patient, as Junt has really explained in really good detail. It's a lot more than just hitting a button that says upgrade. It's a lot more stuff that's happening behind the scenes that, unless you're really in the nitty-gritty on game development and design and all that kind of stuff, you'd probably never even think about.
And it's not very well documented either. Documentation for OpenXR, it's not as mature as the documentation from the previous runtimes, because you have developers and forums kind of sharing. There was a lot more collaboration back then, and now it's a little bit less so. Now things are getting a little bit more competitive between competitors, so to speak. So the sharing of documentation and content, it's very sparse compared to some of the old runtimes. So there's a lot of fits and starts, pains with that. So when we ship an RC, and I don't know if I want to call it an RC, but more of a beta, I think it's important to keep in mind that we're just trying to make the game stable and playable. So that means no enhancements, no new features quite yet. That's something we certainly want to do, but we just want to ensure stability and make sure things aren't broken. So it's going to be the same Pavlov you know and love. It's not going to have scopes. It's not going to have Gore quite yet. And that's if we ship on Shack. a beta to kind of have the community mess around and play with. And then once we establish that we have the same game that we'd had before, that's when we come in with the enhancements. That's when we try to put in the scopes, try to switch to Vulkan rendering and get all the performance benefits out of that. Vulkan rendering is sort of a graphics, low-level graphics API that lets you talk directly with the hardware as opposed to using all this sort of middleware that just adds more performance overhead. So it's going to be difficult because we're going to have to get very low level with it, which is why if you are a graphics processor, please apply with us at jobs@vankrupt.com. We'd love to speak with you. If you're just coming out of school and you've got a degree in low-level programming, please send us because we're going to still take care of it, but more people would be nice, and it would help us speed up as well.
Well, I know everybody's certainly on board with supporting supporting the update and trying to give as much feedback as possible. I got a great question here from the community talking about kind of like play testing and quality assurance, and with so many moving pieces on both the PC Pavlov side and also the Shack side, and eventually, some of the other partners that you've kind of alluded to here today. How do you make sure that every aspect of the game is really properly tested and functioning up to the Vankrupt standard?
Well, there is no perfect game. There's no way to ensure that you uncover every single bug. You can imagine, today a lot of games ship with a lot of problems. That's due to budgetary concerns and making sure the stakeholders are happy. We're a little different in the sense that we don't have any stakeholders to answer to but Dave and his expectations. We have a QA team, and we run them through the gamut and try to uncover as much stuff as possible that could be problematic. And they, for the most part, do a really good job. And what's interesting is they'll find bugs that have existed in the game for years that no one's noticed, but we'll patch it out anyway, just kind of under the radar, just because of how thorough that they are with it. And that being said, they're not going to catch everything. But at the same time, we also ship public betas, both on Oculus and on PC. And we want people to download and experiment and kind of see, the new stuff that's on the horizon. If you're very passionate about the game and you want to know news and what's, in the future for that, that's a really good way to sort of get your finger on the pulse of what's going on and what we have going in the future. And of course, Dave will post some leaks, Dave leaks that are famously known for, of a lot of art assets or tech art, and that gives a little clues into sort of the new content that we're working on as well, such as new player models. For example, we just rigged and completed a Russian Jared model, which is hilarious, and I love it to death. And we've got some other stuff in the works, but it's going to take time. Modeling humans and the detail and fidelity that we're going for, it's very labor intensive. And so that's a lot of things that we're excited about.
So it sounds to me like a pretty big call to action for the community. If folks want to be part of, helping out beta tests, getting the new builds, looking them over, reporting the bugs, Junt, what is the best way for them to submit, the bugs that they find or the feedback that they have?
Yeah, so we have a Discord. We monitor the bug channels for those. And I don't think the bugs channel is public for Shack, but you can just notify a Shack tester and they'll just collect that data and, forward it to us. And my DMs are open. If you can write a decent bug report, and it doesn't have to be super thorough, but an image or a video of, in action and how to possibly replicate it, that goes a long way with trying to figure out, how we can resolve it.
If I could, I don't want to pin you down to specific, days and months or anything like that, because we know this is all in flux and that it's never been done before, so it's really hard to put a timeline on things. But I'd like to talk just kind of generically about overall progress and overall goals, maybe just for this year. So I know Dave has said, so for Shack, we're looking at engine upgrade, the latest we have, which was last night. It's still being worked on. It was still botched for what Dave said. So when that gets unbotched, the plans are, and again, I'll let you correct all this, but here's kind of my read on it. Plans are to throw out a public release candidate, an RC version, which will come out in the Oculus app. You'll have to switch over to the release candidate channel to get that download. That'll download. You'll be able to play that. But like we've seen with other kind of, updates, that'll also mean that a lot of the lobbies and a lot of the servers that you're used to playing on aren't going to be available because they're not going to be running on that new 4.27. So we'll have a little bit of lag time there between when the RC comes out, when the new upgraded engine comes out for kind of public consumption and testing, versus when we're going to get, maps that are updated and lobbies that are up and all that kind of stuff. So it might be a little bit lonely on that RC channel for a short period of time. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. Although one thing I've noticed with our Oculus, more people join those betas, which, we have a bigger population on the Quest. But yeah, a lot of people throw up beta servers, which, if you're a server hoster, you can access. You can access the actual command line to update the server to a beta version, for example. And yeah, it's not going to be very lonely, but what you can do is sort of talk to people that are, also beta interested and see if you can get a group going, and then you can actually kind of spend some time in there and have fun at the same time. And then if something goes awry, you can just let us know, and then we'll be happy to look into it. Because right now our concern is stability and having all our, back-end systems talking to each other. So we've got the servers, we've got our middleware like our Epic Online Services, anti-cheat's fine in our testing for PC at least. And we want to do Quest first. We think we need to get onto the Quest store proper. Not only would it help, generate some income for us, because right now Oculus has been a very, very heavy loss leader for us because we're paying for the servers and we're not really selling anything on that platform. We're not selling the game. We're not selling skins. So it's been sort of a lot of expenditure going into the lobby servers. And your head would spin if you saw the server bills. I'm telling you. So PC has been sort of funding us this whole time. And once we get on the store, we'll probably lose a bit of the population going from free to paid, but that will give us a lot of extra funding that will help expand. And it's not like we're hurting financially at all. We have a really long runway, trust me. But more security wouldn't help. And it's not about sustaining the company we have now. It's more about growing the company and hiring more engineers, hiring more artists. The sky's the limit. Make the company as AA as possible. And then, if we can keep, parlaying that success, we could set our eyes possibly to AAA and become a AAA studio that makes, that employs hundreds of employees that are working on a single title. And we can dedicate to, VR content, once the audience is there. Because I think there's no real stopping VR now. When it first launched on PC, it kind of became a joke within a lot of gaming spaces, like, haha, VR, it's never going to take off, this, that, the other thing, and, it's destined to fail. Nobody wants to wear, the stupid glasses on their face to play games. Well, they were kind of proven wrong with the Oculus Quest. it wasn't a question of, comfort or content. It was really just a question of cost and, you know, access. People don't like that tether on the wire. They like the wireless. Um, they like that $300 price point. You kind of hit all those factors, and now it's like skyrocketing in popularity. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it
So
really is. And to think that this wasn't something that was really readily accessible just a couple of short years ago, to see though, again, 15, 16,000 people at any given time are playing Pavlov. That's really something. That's really exciting to be a part of it. So I guess just back to the timeline in terms of looking at the rest of the year, would you say at some point in 2022, the goal is to get the Pavlov Shack not in a beta, but actually on a full release on the Oculus Quest store? Is that something in this year that you'd like to see happen?
that's what we'd like to see this year. This year is a focus on quality of life and polish.
All right.
That is the company goals for this year.
And I
And
know there's a lot of different, terms of service and agreements, and it makes sense, right? If you're Sony, if you're, Steam, if you're Oculus, you want to have a level playing field as best as you can. So there are some things that are obviously outside of Vankrupt's control in terms of just, you want to be on this platform, you got to do A, B, and C. You mentioned the engine upgrade and that kind of stuff. What about
right,
the price point? I've heard that the price point is going to be standard pretty much across the board.
that's our goal right now, is to have parity. We want to have feature parity and price parity. And I think it's been a while since I looked at this, but I'm fairly sure that we are required to have price parity if we want to be on the Oculus store, um, for Quest. And it initially started as, Shack is, a little bit feature stripped down, and I don't want to make it seem this way, but the lesser version of Pavlov, which is no longer the case. Maybe in a few aspects, such as, number of players in a server at a given time, or features like Gore and scopes. But with some of the changes that we're making, we're going to have pretty much feature parity. The only difference is in fidelity, which is why we can't do crossplay. We don't want to downgrade the PC experience just to have, play with your Quest friends. We're going to look at some other things that we can maybe do, like, have a Quest version that you can download on PC to have the downgraded sort of assets and maps, so that you can play crossplay on the PC. But we don't want to sacrifice the high quality content that we've created on PC, just to have crossplay. And crossplay for a lot of companies is a necessity, because the populations and player retention on PC for other content creators are pretty bad and pretty abysmal, and they're almost forced to do crossplay if they want to make sure that people that play the multiplayer games can still play with other people. And we've been fortunate enough with our player retention that we don't really necessarily have to do that. And I know it's not great to be on two different platforms and not be able to play with your friends, but I think we've made the executive decision that we don't want to sacrifice fidelity, full stop. Like, that is not something we ever want to do. We've seen it happen with other content and sort of the fallout from that. And it may not seem that way, but we respect the player, we respect the customer. I know the customer really wants the crossplay, but that would require so much sacrifice, and that's just something that we're not comfortable doing.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, if you're playing on a PC game with gosh, I just bought this new PC thanks to Rudy, $4,000 out the door. But, the graphics, as you can imagine, they're, and I'm not telling you something you don't know, but they're just hundreds and thousands of times better. But look at the equipment I have. Look, I've got a dedicated, graphic processor. I've got $4,000 versus a $200, $300 headset. I mean, running on an Android phone, essentially. So, of course it's going to be a more immersive experience. Look at the current map file limitations right now. On Quest, you get 100 megabytes. Well, gosh, that's next to nothing when you're trying to pack in assets and all that. So I guess, as much as, and we did have crossplay accidentally I don't know if it was last year or whatever it was, but there was a very short time when you could have crossplay. And again, it was just a whole bunch of comments about, I don't want to play on Quest. If I wanted to play on Quest, I'd buy a Quest, and these types of things, these quality of life things that you're talking about, that on the PC side, you're kind of used to, a lot richer graphics and all that, just because the GPU can handle that stuff. You lose all that, and then, as you say, you don't want anyone to have a bad experience.
Right, and just to iterate off that, it's not just graphic fidelity, but also just like the dense amount of props, and there's triangle limitations that we have on Quest, draw call limitations, and material limitations. But it's not just that. So like if you picture out a fully fleshed map with littered with props, and you try to support crossplay with that, and you have somebody on PC that has a stack of barrels in front of them, but the person playing on Shack doesn't have a stack of barrels, and they just see this empty space. That's just a straight up incompatibility. It can't work that way, which is why we would have to sacrifice the maps, the quality of the maps. We wouldn't be able to support as many players in a server at a given time. So, we would be sort of locked down to like 10 people. And we're working hard to do better. For example, we started with a max of 8 players in Quest. Well, we've got it up to 10. And we want to try to experiment more now that we're moving into a new engine. See if we can get more players on screen. The thing is, it's very expensive, because when you're dealing with 2D games and animation states, when you kind of look at the logic of how a player looks in a video game, it's basically just a character and triggering animation states. That's not VR, because in VR you have dynamically moving hands and animation, moving heads, people moving their arms and hands around. That all has to be tracked in a physical sense, and all that math has to be calculated and sent to each client. And that's computationally expensive, especially for a mobile game. And when you're on a PC and using a mouse and keyboard, you've basically got 2 axes of direction, and then you can just trigger a reload animation. And all that stuff is just a simple command that's being sent, as opposed to actual coordinates of a 3-axis space being sort of accessed in a sort of multiplayer environment. So that's part of the difficulty with VR, and especially with mobile.
So I want to shift gears for a minute, and let's just knock off a couple of these kind of quick hitter questions, if we could.
Okay, obviously been as quick as possible.
There's been talk about skins being available. Can you talk briefly about skins? Are they coming? Are they going to be paid? Are they going to be tied to achievements? Is it a combination? What do you see as the future of skins for, I guess, players and guns?
Okay, so right now, all the skins that we're making are gifts to previous community members that were promised skins for some early beta testing or for winning tournaments. And then we'll have paid, like all the other skins will be purchasable on our store. As far as unlockable skins, right now we only have one in the pipeline that's going to be unlocked through the tutorial, and we know which skin it is, and I'm so excited for people to see the skin. It's so funny. So we want to give incentive for people to play the tutorial. We don't want to force the tutorial on people. I know that's a very hotly controversial product. Controversial, stance is not forcing people to do the tutorial, but we want to also provide incentive for people to play the tutorial before playing the game. And so right now, as far as unlockables, we only have one thing that's planned. The rest are sort of paid. And we have a lot of skins. We want to make more, of course. And a lot of the skins are already done. It's just a matter of implementing the store, the back end, the payment processor, all that stuff. We have to make sure that we're negotiating with all the platform holders to make sure that we're doing it within their rules, making sure that they get their cut and their fair share. And then there's also the question of community submitted skins and being able to create a skin for Pavlov, submit it to us, have it approved, and then come up with some sort of profit share agreement. Um, because, of course, we want you to get paid for the content you create. And we have to pay our platform holders for the platform they're hosting us on. And then a little bit of scratch for us as well for, just creating the environment to allow that in the first place. I think that's a very fair thing. And if you don't want to go that path, then you don't have to. And then, so that's something in the far end that we also want to do. I can't say with certainty that we will, but we're going to have to get, legal agreements drafted up and make sure that, everybody is fairly compensated. But also agreements in place that there's no, somebody regrets submitting a skin and unhappy with, either the pay that they get as a result, or moving on and don't want their content on the game. So there's a lot of legal considerations for the community submitted content that we have to get in place before that will be considered. But we do want to launch the store before we get the player submitted stuff and community driven content.
Super. Safe to say that's on the 2022 timeline?
Yes.
All right.
But I'd like to say it's a very broad 2022, but I hate giving out dates because we're not historically good about hitting our marks when it comes to dates. So whenever somebody asks, when is this going to happen? I'm very vague, and I'm very vague on purpose because a lot of stuff comes in the way. Something that you can see is simple. You can hit all these roadblocks.
Well, especially when dealing with third parties. I mean, let's face it, you can't control Oculus, you can't control Steam, you can't control these big enterprises. So we know you'll give it your best shot. Everybody's looking forward to the skins. I know there's been a couple of glimpses of them here and there. Of course, if you get a chance and are lucky enough to play in game with a dev, you have seen some of their cool skins like the Jared gun and all that stuff. Very cool content that is. We look forward to seeing in the game. It really adds a whole new element to the game.
Absolutely. And, skins are just cosmetic. They're going to be optional. A lot of people don't like microtransactions, but we don't have any plans to do, pay to win, I guess, if you want to call it that. And it's optional. And there's also some concerns about World War II. And if we're going to have anime skins on a Garand, that's not going to happen. If right now everything for skins is planned for the modern weapons, and if we do decide to go in the direction of World War II skins, it's going to be period accurate, tasteful sort of skins, like a soldier that, carved out all the landings that they did for, parachuting on the butt of, on the stock of their gun, or, a disheveled weapon that's sort of been in combat for a long time, so it's a little tattered up. That's what we would want to do for World War II. We have absolutely nothing planned quite yet for World War II skins, but if we were, that's the direction that we would want to take to make sure that, if you're playing, Dog Green Sector, if you're playing Dog Green Sector and you've got somebody, running up on your tail with a neon flashing gun, it's going to really pull you out of the experience. So we want to make sure that that stays in that sort of era.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and that really helps with the immersion. Like you said, you wouldn't have an anime character coming at you on D-Day or something, right?
Exactly.
Any plans for a co-op hunt mode?
Ooh, Ooh, yeah, that's something I'd really like to do. We definitely want to flesh out our co-op and offline experience. Um, it's we kind of have to rebuild it because the logic was all built around single player, but it's something it's quite backburnered, but it's definitely in our minds. One of our biggest criticisms, and it's a fair criticism, is our lack of offline content, and that's a very, very valid point to make when you're trying to kind of say, is Pavlov a good game? Well, the offline stuff is a little bit lacking. That's absolutely true. The game was originally built for, shared multiplayer experiences, but as the game gains popularity and different play styles and purpose players have with the game, like a lot of people don't want to play multiplayer at all. They just want to play co-op content with their friends. They don't want to play PvP. We definitely want to cater to that. But there's so much on our plate now. I don't know if co-op hunts will happen anytime soon, but that's something I'd really love to see happen because I love hunt, and I like it a little bit more than zombies because it's not just fighting melee characters, but you're fighting people, behind cover or things like that. So it's a little bit more fun for me personally, and I love zombies. Don't get me wrong. It's just a different sort of play style, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Here's a good one. Any plans for a quality of life update for the DP27 magazine to spin when it is thrown? Many players would love to throw this magazine like a frisbee, and it's disappointing that it doesn't spin.
Okay, so that's a really funny point because when we first implemented the DP27, my first thought was, man, I would love to see a disc golf mod of somebody playing disc golf with this magazine, or drum if you want to call it that. So magazines do not spin. It's not just a DP27. You could take any magazine out of a gun and throw it, and it will stay static during its trajectory. The magazine system wasn't originally built with physics in mind. If it was built, it would probably be built client side. Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. We would have to. I can't say yes with certainty.
All right.
Just the way our magazine system is sort of being built, and we have to improve on network authority over the magazines. I know some people kind of notice, like when you throw something, it kind of jumps on the ground a little bit. That's because it's your client and then the server are sort of fighting over each other of where it actually landed or where it actually was thrown to. So we have to take those sort of considerations into account if we were to have spinning and network magazines and more server authority over it too, so it's a little bit more accurate.
In regards to gameplay, what is the one thing that you think is perhaps the most overlooked part of Pavlov that players just simply don't know about?
The tutorial.
Okay. Speaking about the tutorial,
varied. You have to go to offline and then training, and it's called training, not tutorial. So I don't know if that throws people off, but that's the most overlooked thing, 100%.
So we recently have gotten PropHunt on Shack. It's a lot of fun. We don't have many maps for it yet. A shout out to Messiah Penguin, who's been really the only map maker that's put out maps. So we were playing on it last night, actually. And there are these taunts that come up, and it's your voice. You're in the PropHunt game.
Yeah.
And how did that happen? Like, what's the experience like? What is it like being actually taunting someone in a video game? I think it's hilarious.
You like video games, dude?
So it all sort of spawned from Mott, who was the developer that wanted to implement PropHunt, and
You're not very good at this game.
so we needed some taunts, and we would have QA tests where one of our developers would record me just saying I'm kind of like a very outward and expressive person.
Getting lonely over here.
And so I goof around a lot, sort of during our playtests, and sometimes those would get captured and played back as inside jokes.
Did you know prop backwards?
So then just started to become discussions of like, oh, we should do taunts.
Hey, look at us,
Junt,
huh?
I guess.
Friends,
So
having fun.
I don't know. It's really strange how that came about. And so for the most part, it's me and our other sound designer, Brandon, who recorded most of the taunts. There's a few other ones. And it's funny how I had to get the recording session. My best microphone is, oddly enough, the Valve Index. So I built a blanket fort in my living room and placed my Valve Index inside it. And because you don't want to have reverb and echoes coming off the walls of your house, messing up the audio recording. So I built a blanket and pillow fort, shoved my index in there, and just started recording taunts. Most of it's ad-libbed. I had maybe like 10 written down, and most of those I don't even think went in. And so I was recording them, and I just sort of ran out real quickly. So it just became like what comes into my mind. I'll just say it, and it has to be propagated, I guess. And that's sort of how it went. I don't know. I was
Like
actually
video games,
surprised that it actually made it in. I thought, I was going to send this to the sound team. And they're going to be like, oh, this is garbage. We can't use this. Or Mott, having the final approval of what, taunts go in and be like, this doesn't make sense. This is dumb. But I guess they saw the humor in it and implemented it. So my favorite prop is the moon.
One of the things that was talked about on the upvote site was a campaign type mode. Is that something that's still planned?
That's something we would love to do. It's a bit far out of our reach for this year. We'll have to see. Because, should we spend more time on Pavlov, or should we make Pavlov 2 and have that be the first campaign? And that's not to say Pavlov 2 is coming next, or it's in the works, or anything of the sort. We do have future content that we want to create that's not Pavlov, and it's not announced in any capacity, but it's not Pavlov 2. But we do entertain the idea of making a sequel to Pavlov, fixing a lot of long-standing issues, fleshing out content, especially if the team is much bigger and we have, all the talent to kind of achieve those goals. And also leave a lot of that early foundational stuff behind and start anew. There's a lot of people that are like, I want, my arms. I want to see my arms. I want the guns to collide with, other objects instead of just phasing through walls. And that's not something we can do in the scope of our current game as far as like those sort of enhancements, because it's a very fundamental gameplay difference when you start colliding things with each other when you weren't used to that before. It can be very frustrating if it's not done right. It could be very frustrating if you play a certain way and all of a sudden you're getting caught on door frames, or you can't move around as much as you used to because everything feels a little bit more claustrophobic, because you have to you have to take all these considerations into account when moving around. So probably not in the scope of Pavlov 1, possibly for a sequel. I don't know. It's not actually, it's like I said, it's not in development. But as far as the campaign, that's something we definitely really want to do, and that's related to the offline content with co-op hunt. Is we definitely want to make more offline things for people to play that don't exactly want the player versus player experience. I can't answer that question 100%.
Okay, well, that's fine. We appreciate the insights, and certainly for those of you that are looking for kind of a campaign type mode, I think Push is probably the closest thing you have right now, and that's a tremendous amount of fun if you haven't checked out that game mode.
Yeah, and if you're on PC, there's one workshop creator called Player Pro C. He made this like 3-hour campaign that's just mind-bogglingly dense. And it's co-op too. You can try that out, and it's really fun.
So I want to get one more Pavlov question from you, if I'm allowed, and then I'd like to shift over and kind of talk on a more professional, personal note, if that's okay. So the Pavlov question that comes up seemingly all the time is, what in the world is a Jared, and how did a Jared become the mascot of Vankrupt?
So Jared is a taxidermied deer rectum or anus. It started within the taxidermy community. It's called a swamp booger. And it was just, we had one of our previous employees post it, and it's such a shocking image to see because you don't understand what you're looking at. And, it's actually, it's physical. It looks real because, somebody made that and took a picture. So it's not like something that was rendered. And it was so shocking and confusing and like incomprehensible that it just became so funny to us or to Dave especially, that we should adopt him as our mascot. Started as Jared.
Well, there we go. And as you've revealed before, there'll be an upcoming Jared player skin that we look forward to seeing in the game at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're going to have a player model, Jared. We're inspired by Jared. We'll have his vest will say Jared, and he'll be Russian.
Well, there we go. Well, I'd like to shift over, if I could, just for the last couple of minutes I've got you, and I appreciate your generosity with your time today. I know this is really exciting to talk to you and kind of hear behind the scenes, the inner workings of what's going on a day-to-day. But just kind of professionally, if you don't mind sharing some advice. You've mentioned a couple times you guys are hiring, you're looking for talent. If you are, a student in high school or in college, and you want to get involved in the whole video game development experience, what's kind of the best way? What is some advice you would have for students out there?
Sure. So one thing is, if you want to get involved with games, make sure you kind of know what you're getting into. A AAA studio can be a very grueling industry. Thankfully, we have a lot of indie companies these days, and that's a great thing. And you don't have to deal with the pains of such a large, massive company just churning and burning employees all the time. So just kind of have that understanding of what the industry is sort of like. But to get your feet in the door, know what you want to do. So if you're not an artist, but you're very math-minded or programming-minded, you can just start creating content. Download Unity, download Unreal, create content for other games, such as ours, and get a fundamental understanding of how engines work. Make sure you have that drive. Just keep working. The best thing you can really have is a portfolio. If you have a portfolio that demonstrates a lot of work and you can track the timelines of how much time you spent on that project, and that's very important because you can have a portfolio, but if it took you, 3 years to make, one map, that's going to be different from somebody that can make a beautiful map in a matter of, a few months. So track your time within projects. Make sure, you're comfortable cutting things. If something's not working, you got to realize it ahead of time and just either cut it or move on, because the worst thing you can do is have some sunk cost fallacy, and that's a very big trap to fall into. So be agile. If something's not working, change it up, pivot. But as long as you're creating and So if you're not an artist, you can still just make basic assets, really cheap geometry, and it doesn't have to look good. And if the core of what you're doing is the code or the gameplay, that's really going to be what shines. So it doesn't matter what the game looks like, unless you're trying to sort of release it into the wild and start charging people. But you can also do things like, release it for free and just have people play it and give you feedback on what they think. Just make videos on it and post it on YouTube, share it on Reddit, and be like, I made a thing. What do you guys think? Just do that. And there's a lot of resources online to get where you need to go. And that's the great thing about sort of the modern internet we have. You don't have to go and buy programming books, although that does help. And, those books can be cheap. You can also go to the library. And if you're strapped for cash, you can go to the library and kind of learn some programming that way. The same with the artist side and doing 3D modeling, building environments. One thing you don't want to get stuck in the mindset of is I just take assets and I place them. A really good skill to have is the ability to generate those assets and know how to actually model in 3D. That's a very, very useful skill. And it's fairly difficult to get in. Well, actually, no, that's not true because Blender is free. So there's free resources to do that. Unreal Engine is free. You can just download it and start building a game. And you don't have to pay any licensing fees until you start making money with it. Same with Blender. That's a free tool. There's so many, online resources, YouTube videos, websites, online training classes for free, like Khan Academy, Code Academy, that will teach you fundamentals, for free. You got to have the drive, you got to have the motivation, and you got to stick to it. Ship content, just get it out the door, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Get it in a great state. As long as it can demonstrate your ability, that's very important for a portfolio. And you don't want just one thing for your portfolio. You kind of want many, and it needs to be quality. So you can have several projects and just keep fleshing them out, keep fleshing out the ideas. And if you really, really need to get, make maps and make content for Pavlov, you're not going to get very low level with it, but you'll have a very good understanding of programming with the blueprints. It teaches some good fundamentals, especially with, dealing with network authority and client authority. Those are really important things to learn if you're going to get into multiplayer. As far as single player, you don't really have to worry about that. And you could still make single player content for Pavlov and just not have any, intention of it being player versus player. And then by side effect, you can sort of make it co-op. You'll still need some network authority on that sense. But just build a portfolio. If you're in high school and you really want to get into a good school, like maybe like Full Sail, you can apply for that school and then also give them your portfolio. That's going to get you so far ahead that other, students aren't going to have because they've never built a thing before. They just graduated high school and they're like, I really like games, let me make games. But they don't really have much fundamental experience quite yet. So not only will it get you into schools, but it'll get your foot through the door with companies as well. And we've hired people that are, not classically trained, so to speak, but have been involved in Pavlov and showed their dedication, showed their ability to keep working and keep learning. And they were able to join the company as a result. And not every company is going to be able to do that, but there's a lot of companies that will, especially indie companies.
Well, it would be a major, major oversight if I didn't ask a couple of cooking questions, and I will say I've gotten so many from the community, it was hard to pick a few. But as many of you know, Junt is very famous for his cooking streams, which are broadcast live on the Pavlov Discord. Junt, how did you get into cooking? Did you dream of becoming a chef at some point in your life? And what is your favorite dish to make?
Oh, okay. My favorite, I guess that would be my signature dish, right?
Yes, the Junt signature.
The signature dish. Okay, I used to be a super picky eater, chicken nuggets and fries. I didn't want anything else. And somewhere around, I can't remember, it was 14 or 15 or something like that. My friend convinced me to eat sushi. And that, like, if you're a picky eater, the idea of eating raw fish is like so far removed from the last thing you want to do. But my friend had, he has a golden tongue and he can convince you to almost do anything. So he convinced me to go and eat sushi with him, and I could not believe how good it was. Like it flipped a light switch on my brain that my whole life has been a lie. All this delicious food out here, I need to be more open-minded and things like that. So it just it triggered something in my brain that, okay, I gotta explore more with food. And uh it led me to kind of like making things at home, just like little simple dishes and things like that. And then I started watching, cooking TV channels like or YouTube videos. I really liked watching Good Eats with Alton Brown because he made cooking seem like chemistry. And that's the way I kind of like to look at it. Like cooking is like alchemy. Um, it's like you're putting all these concoctions together and creating something new. And a lot of it can be based off feeling or your gut, and a lot of it's based off science too, and like sort of how food and things interact with each other with different ingredients. So it just kind of spiraled from there. And there's molecular gastronomy, which is like the top tier of Michelin starred restaurants, and I'd love to like get involved with that someday. And I did at some level when I made a drink recently where I was like, I had to juice like 5 different ingredients, and then I had to clean the juicer in between each one so that they didn't contaminate each other. I had to weigh them down to like the 10th of a gram and just do this whole process of making this drink. I had to buy a like a carbonator to achieve it, but it was like a celery soda with Serrano ice and infused with ginger. Uh, it's I got it from this book that my girlfriend got me that came from the Alinea Group, which is like a Michelin starred sort of restaurant. Um, that's sort of like the final tier. I think my holy grail I finally did last year was doing a beef Wellington, and it came out perfect. And I couldn't understand why, because I've heard so many disaster scenarios about how it goes wrong, but somehow it came out perfect. That's not my signature dish because I made it once. I want to make it again, but boy, that beef tenderloin's expensive. My current signature dish, it sort of changes as I like learn new things and develop, new like self fads, I guess, if you want to call it that. Anyways, my first signature dish when I was getting serious was like a seared tuna steak with soba noodles and seaweed salad. After that, it went to like a shepherd's pie. I just really liked making shepherd's pie at the time. And now my signature dish is rack of lamb in a mint caper sauce. That's really it's so delicious, and it's like that lollipop lamb that you kind of just like nibble off the bone.
Is it safe to say if you weren't working at Vankrupt, you might be a chef somewhere?
No, honestly, like that's the one thing I'm scared of is like if I got involved with the food industry that I would hate it, and it's grueling hours. It's not a great environment to work in, and I don't even know if I could cook at volume like that and remain consistent. Um, I'm not classically trained as a chef either, so
Well, it's always a lot of fun to watch you on your cooking streams. I hope you continue to do that. Is there any big community outreach or events planned as we kind of go on this cadence of releasing the new engine upgrade?
as far as cooking,
Well, just general community outreach opportunities to play with devs or to play with anybody on the team, stuff like that.
Right. Well, I want to respect my coworkers' time. One thing that Dave thinks, one thing that Dave knows is paramount is a good work-life balance. So he does not want you crunching like crazy. If you crunch like crazy, that's on your own time, and I guess Mark does that to himself. Uh, that guy loves to work. So it's a little bit crazy right now with the engine upgrade, at least for the senior programmers. But I don't want to kind of make the other developers feel obligated to join. I would definitely extend the offer, but I'm more than happy to play with people in game or host little Discord sessions. And have like some group plays, and that's sort of where the whole cooking streams came about, is just interacting with the community, give me something to do. I am not a great mapper. That's not one of my skill sets. So making maps in VR and trying to upload them to workshop and talk with the community, I don't have the skill for that.
Does that mean we won't be seeing Junt's Love Shack on 4.27?
Oh, probably not.
Oh, man.
That map is a piece of junk. I could get a map functional, and that's all that was really supposed to be demonstratable, was how to create a map, get the materials squared away, and prep it and get it cooked and stuff like that. Some little techniques here and there that will help you along the way.
Well, it's been a big help, and certainly allowed me to make my first couple of maps. So I appreciate that video and the time you spent teaching everybody how to do it. I know it's not an easy process.
Yeah, I think there was something I forgot in there that I forgot to put in the video, but maybe I'll make another one for 2.7. But one thing I would like to mention is that's a heavy and fair criticism, I should say, that we don't do that much community outreach. We're not very outward with sort of what we're doing. Some people are like, what does Junt actually do? He's a community manager, but he's not really doing much in that sense. Well, one of our fundamental philosophies is the community, like organic community generated content. So we don't want to force things too much, because it more often than not doesn't work out that way. For example, we created Stalingrad as a map, and that became the map that we wanted to put push on. We eventually shipped it with push, but people love Dark Green Sector, and we'll play that all day. And then Stalingrad doesn't get much love, so we're still very proud of the map. It does see a lot of gameplay, maybe not for push. But when we were building tanks, we needed a map that supported tanks, and we wanted to do sort of an objective style system. So that's sort of how that project spawned. But that's not how the community responded. So when we try to be very forceful in regards to content and things, we could always sometimes get it wrong. And the community will do something way better than us. And that's why we have, the workshop, where the community can put out content at a much faster pace than we could ever hope to achieve. And that's a great thing. A lot of people think that's us trying to put all the weight on the shoulders of the mappers and, just let them take care of everything for us. That's not how we see things. And if you've paid attention to our updates, we've been shipping, maps and, actual creative content that, Santorini, Bunker, Stalingrad, all those assets were created from scratch. We're not purchasing them or anything. So it takes a lot of time and effort to get those things created and out the door. So it may not be at the pace that other people expect from other games, but we don't have the benefit of just purchasing assets from the Unreal Marketplace and just kind of plopping them down. We have to model everything from scratch. And our current project, Sand 2. So Sand is getting a facelift, and oh god, does it look so good so far. It's going to be the same layout in a, I don't want to say too much, but yeah. So that's sort of where our philosophy is let the community speak and discover what works and what doesn't work, and we don't post that much news because our development is very dynamic. So one thing that we're working on internally, it may not work out, and it might have been a bad idea. And if we're vocal about that and saying this is what we're going to do, we're going to ship this feature, and then it never comes, it can tend to backfire on us. And so that's why we're very careful about sort of what we say outwardly and publicly. Is we don't want to make promises that we can't keep or timelines that we can't achieve. And we're not historically good at timelines and things like that. So that's sort of why we're quiet in the sense. And that's why we have, community servers where server owners are free to do whatever within reason they want with their server. And a lot of people don't enjoy that. They think, this server has mod abuse. Well, you could use our lobby system. You could join other servers. You don't have to play that particular server unless it's, a workshop map that's, exclusive to that server. That's another story, but there's not much content that does that particular function. And so we want to embrace our community. We don't want to force, a league by, creating our own league. We let it form organically through the community that want to form it themselves. And sort of the same with our marketing. And we don't really market ourselves. We put out teaser trailers and things like that just to kind of get people interested and get a sense that, oh, this this new game mode is imminent. This is coming soon. Like, look at all this new stuff we're working on. That's our sort of way of communicating. And it takes a long time to get there. And so if we're just spending months saying, we're still working on this map. Yep, the map is still being worked on. And we do provide some behind the scenes stuff with our Patreon subscribers, which we might be phasing out. So we'll see. But I could do better about being more outwardly facing about what's going on behind the scenes, because I know a lot of people are interested in that.
Well, this has certainly been insightful, and we just can't say thank you enough for your time today. Very generous. We really appreciate you giving this level of detail and exposing us to some of the inner workings behind the scenes. If folks want to stay in touch with you, if they want to stay on top of new developments, what's the best way for them to do so?
Pay attention to our betas. Join our Discord. That's where we're most active. And our Steam forums are one way, but Steam, like the old internet forum system, is not very conductive to good communication. Discord is so much more dynamic and iterative and on your toes, I suppose you can call it that. That the old thread form system is not so great. And we listen in all that sense, but the Steam forums is really difficult to get people to try our betas. It seems like the Discord is the best way because people can actively talk to us. We can respond easily, and it's not hours in between. It can be a matter of minutes or seconds. And then you can also post on Reddit. I mean, we read Reddit, or I certainly do, and I take that feedback to the developers. So a lot of people say, this is my feature wish list, or this is my, my dream update and bug fixes or change log. I love that stuff. That stuff is great. We can't do everything, of course. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of scope. It's a matter of making sure, we get the right features. But it's also our outlook on the game and the goals or the vision that Dave has for the game differs from the vision that other players might think that the game could be. And that's one thing to keep in mind. along with balance aspects. A lot of people suggest things that will sort of really change the fundamental balance of the game itself. And so those are some things we can't really consider, or if we do, it would take a lot of consideration and tinkering to kind of accommodate that. So just some things to keep in mind if you're going to suggest something. And try not to be too upset that it's not something that we're willing to do because it interferes with, Dave's vision for what he wants for Pavlov.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Hope that you can come back again at a later time and give us some more updates. But this has been wonderful. Please say thank you to the entire team. I know you guys are working very, very tirelessly to make the game the best it possibly can be, and everybody really appreciates it. So please convey our thank you to the team, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. And if you're out there and you have something to say to me, like, my DM is open. You can message me on Reddit, I suppose. You can find me in the pin post as Juntistic. Yeah, if you've got criticisms, I'd love to hear them. Any sort of feedback, I'm really open to, especially if you've got bugs. If you got bugs, please send them to me so we can investigate them and properly document them and hopefully replicate and resolve them. But thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it for episode 3 of the Pavlov podcast. A massive thank you to Vankrupt and a thank you to Junt for being so generous with his time. As you just heard, we covered a wide range of topics. A lot of new information was revealed. I really hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I hope to see you back for the next one. Until then, this is your friend KoolAidMan. You stay safe out there.
Soft drink mix.